Hi everyone, and welcome on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. We're at Mammoth Hot Springs, and yes, there are elk at Mammoth Hot Springs, and if you look carefully off in the distance there behind where they've got the road barriers, you can see a cow elk with a young baby. That's really a cool sight. I don't see any bulls around at the moment, but there's another cow munching away. You can see the route map at yellowstonetours.net/map. Anyway, as I was saying, welcome on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. This is Mammoth Hot Springs. This is the park's headquarters. And today we're going to do the section of road between Mammoth Hot Springs and the north entrance of the park. Just outside the north entrance is Gardner. Ahead of us, that's the Horace Albright Visitor Center. If you have a look, you see these wonderful historic old buildings for the most part. Have a look through over there and behind there. The reason is that this is where the US Army was based. And I'm going to tell you that story in a minute, but isn't this cool over here? See how the bear that are guarding the post office at Mammoth are wearing masks because of the coronavirus. It's nice to see that the United States Post Office has a sense of humor. That building over there, which is a modern building, I think it was built 4 or 5 years ago, if memory serves me correctly, that is the Yellowstone Justice Center. There is actually a courthouse right here in Yellowstone, a federal courthouse as well. So if you transgress and are charged with something or other, you'll come over here to Mammoth to face charges. We're dropping down out of the main part of Mammoth, and let me tell you a little bit about Mammoth's history as we drop down to an area next to the Gardner River. Yellowstone, as you probably know by now, was the first national park. It was established in 1872, and because it was the first, the authorities didn't really have much of an idea how they were going to establish law and order. And for a long time, people could pretty much do what they wanted here at Mammoth. You'd have poachers hunting the animals, you'd have people setting up camps and making money out of people camping inside Yellowstone. There were even laundry facilities set up in the hot springs, believe it or not, and people were chipping off bits and pieces of the geyser areas and the hot springs. These, of course, are some of the newer buildings that the Park Service has put in for employee housing. And eventually the authorities decided that they needed to call in the United States Army. And this, coming up on our left, is the Mammoth Campground. The authorities decided that they needed to send in the army to establish law and order inside Yellowstone. And in 1886, the army was sent in. It was actually the United States Cavalry under the command of a Captain Moses Harris from Fort Custer in Montana. And we of course are in Wyoming now, but we're about to cross over into Montana, not too far down this road. The US Army was sent in to establish law and order, because this was long before that there was such a thing as the National Park Service. And the army then cut down on the poaching. They eradicated the hotels and the camps, not really hotels, but the camps where people would stay. They cut down on all the other illicit activity in the park. And they were here, if memory serves me correctly, for 32 years. And then the National Park Service took over, and they run the national parks today. If we have a look ahead of us, we can see the Gardiner River. This is a very interesting part of Yellowstone, because it's the only part of Yellowstone where you can actually soak yourself in a hot springs. Remember that Mammoth is up in that area over there. The Gardner River is down to our right, and the remnants of a hot springs flow into the Gardner River, not too far ahead of us. And people most years, not this year being 2020 and the coronavirus problems, but most years people, once the strong spring water runoff has taken place, people will come and sit in what's called the boiling river. And it really is a unique experience because you can stand with 1 foot in the river at, say, 35, 36 degrees. Oh, look, there's an elk ahead of us. Just slowing down in case he wants to cross the road. Nope. And there was a she, by the way, not a he. You can stand with 1 foot in the river at, say, 35, 36 degrees in the spring, and the other foot in the remnants of the hot spring at, say, 85 or 90 degrees. In that area down there, there's the trail to where you can go back and soak in the river. There are signs up there. Well, there is a sign there that says no nudity allowed, and I think that's for the benefit of our European guests, but the signs to which I was referring are signs that say you can die inside at the boiling river. I'll get back to that at the moment. This area over here is the 45th parallel. This is halfway between the equator and the North Pole, and you may be asking yourself, well, why isn't there a sign saying that that is the 45th parallel? Well, the reason is that the Park Service decided, in their wisdom, to move the 45th parallel about 1.5 miles to the north, and we're traveling in a general northerly direction. They decided to move the 45th parallel about 1.5 miles in this direction because where the 45th parallel actually is, or where it was, or where you'll find it on a map, let's put it that way, was causing too much traffic congestion because it was right next to where the parking lot for the Boiling River was. So you had people parking their cars for the Boiling River, and then you had other people who wanted to take pictures of the sign that used to be there saying Boiling River. This area ahead of us on the right is known for its bighorn sheep. There are bighorn sheep native to Yellowstone. In fact, most of the bighorn sheep in the Yellowstone area are to be found in what's called the Northern Range. And we're basically in the Northern Range at the moment. Where you see those people relaxing, you can see the sign that says halfway between the equator and the North Pole, the 45th parallel. It's not unusual then to see bighorn sheep over here. Unfortunately, bighorn sheep are very susceptible to disease, and they do tend to die off at a rate that's a lot quicker than the authorities would like, particularly if they come into contact with members of with sheep from a domestic cattle herd. Bighorn sheep, the wild sheep, are not as resistant to disease as the domestic sheep are. The north entrance to Yellowstone is basically right over there. It's probably not even 2 miles ahead of us, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility that the bighorn sheep can stroll out of the park. They're not the only animals that get out of the park, and I'll talk a bit more about that if I have time to do so. But you may like to park at that little pullout where the 45th parallel is, then have your back to the sign that says 45th parallel, and look up at the cliffs, look up at the hills in front of you, slightly to your left. Bear in mind that bighorn sheep are likely to be seen in the most inhospitable places, in the places where the cliffs are the steepest, and the reason for that is that it's very difficult for the predators who would like to come after them to get to them if they're in such inaccessible areas. In fact, I was at a section of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone a few years ago, and I'll try and remember to drop pictures of this in, and I came across a female bighorn sheep with a very young baby, and she'd obviously gone down there to give birth. But because that was the safest place for them to be, even though it was such an extremely inhospitable area. It meant that no predators would be able to get down and attack them. I mentioned other animals. You can see the sign perhaps that says North Entrance. Well, this is one of the lowest parts of the park. We're probably at about 5,600 feet here. And in the winter, there you go, 5,300 feet. I was 300 feet off. And in the winters, buffalo tend to migrate to the lower areas of the park to escape the brutally cold winters. And that brings with it a whole host of problems, the main one of which is the disease called brucellosis, which the buffalo carry. And there's a concern amongst the ranchers and farmers and politicians in Montana that if a buffalo that is carrying brucellosis comes into contact with the domestic cattle herd, it could have extremely deleterious consequences for the domestic cattle. And we are leaving Yellowstone right here. This is the north entrance, and I am going to continue this virtual tour just for a little bit longer, and I'll get back to the buffalo story on another one of these virtual Yellowstone tours. But if you have a look ahead of us, you can see the Roosevelt Arch. This building has a lot of historic significance. In the old days, that town over there, it's called Gardner, and it's right on the Yellowstone River, which is in between these buildings and that hill that you see in the background. But Gardner used to be the main entrance to Yellowstone. The railway line used to come out over here, and this is where people would come to start their Yellowstone adventure. And it was decided to create an arch, and as luck would have it, President Theodore Roosevelt was vacationing in this area, doing some hunting and fishing in the general area, and he was invited to come along and give a speech and dedicate the arch, which is what he did, and that is why the arch is called the Roosevelt Arch. Interestingly, though, he never actually saw the arch after it was completed. He never came back to Yellowstone after the arch was completed. I will drop in some pictures of the arch with a viewpoint from the other side, because you can't really see it that well from over here, particularly with where the sun is at the moment. Folks, thank you for joining me on another virtual Yellowstone tour. If you enjoy these virtual Yellowstone tours, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Thank you, and see you in Yellowstone.